Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful July evening here at Rockland Public Library's virtual Zoom talk. We are welcoming back Hester Kohl, who gave a wonderful presentation back in the winter on sleeping your way to better health. So we're pleased to have her here. I would like to thank the Friends of Rockland Public Library for supporting our programming, both virtual and on-site. They are fantastic to us throughout the entire year. So a big thank you to the Friends of the Library. I would like to just take a moment to tell you about a couple of upcoming programs here at the library. We are going to be welcoming the Davis Duo next Thursday for a violin concert, and that's going to be at 2 p.m. That is also on Zoom, so please send me an email at sbillings@rocklandmaine.gov if you would like to attend. Josie and Sophie Davis are sisters, and they will perform a violin concert featuring a range of styles, including classical, jazz, and folk. And 2 weeks from tonight, on July 30th at 6 p.m., we will welcome back Greg Marley for a virtual talk, Foraging for Edible Mushrooms. That will be at 6:30 on July 30th. Greg Marley has been collecting, studying, eating, growing, and teaching mushrooms for over 45 years. And we can't wait to have him back for another informative talk. As for tonight, I'm pleased to welcome you to Am I Hungry with Hester Kohl. At the end of Hester's talk, she's going to call for a Q&A session, and you can use the chat box to type in your questions. We will monitor that, and we will try to get to every question. We will, if you're afraid of forgetting the question, feel free to type it at any time. That will stay up in the chat box. If you prefer, you can use the raise hand feature, and we can take you off of mute to ask your question, but please be aware that if you do that, you will show up on the video unless your video settings are off. So now to introduce this evening's talk with the title of Am I Hungry? Are you spending more time at home these days and struggling with boredom, stress, and full access to food? Anxiety seems to be widespread currently, and for many of us, food is comforting. How do you tell if you're truly hungry or if something just looks tempting? In this workshop with Hester, you'll learn about the symptoms of true hunger and identify what may be the best time to eat. You will also discover the symptoms of head hunger, which is a variety of physical, environmental, and emotional triggers that make us want to eat even if we're not hungry. There is a handout with resources, and if you are interested in that, you can email Hester at some point after the talk at your convenience, and she will get that to you. We'll both provide the email again before the hour is up. So it is my pleasure to welcome Hester Kohl. She is a national board certified health and wellness coach who specializes in one-on-one and group programs to help people enjoy eating and enjoy life. So that's enough out of me, and I hand this over to Hester. Thank you so much for returning to Rockland Public Library.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And just to reiterate, if you would like the handouts at the end, you can send me an email at the email address you see on the screen, hesterkohlwellness@gmail.com. And I'll send you some extra resources. So welcome, everyone. Tonight's topics are really how do we tell when we're hungry versus something just looks good. And we're going to figure out when is the best time for us to eat and what are some of the triggers for that fake hunger called head hunger, and how can we use the knowledge of our triggers to help us figure out what we're really craving. So I call that our true needs. So let's dive in. So I just want to say that mindful eating is not a diet. So this is not saying if you're not hungry, don't eat. This is more about noticing our hunger and becoming aware of when our body is asking for food. So another way of saying this is hunger is the best seasoning. So if we actually wait till we're hungry to eat, the food will taste better and it'll be more satisfying than just sort of mindless snacking just because something's right in front of us. So I'd like to get everyone involved right away and go to your chat window. And I'd just like you to pause and share. How do you know when you are hungry? Just go to your chat window and send a message to everyone. How do you know when you're hungry? What sort of signs or symptoms does your body give you? Okay, so someone said an empty feeling in the stomach that's distracting. Yes. The growling tummy. Yes. Thank you, Tracy. Um, Ian says craving, the stomach makes noise and you start to feel fatigued. And Anne said, my shoulders droop and I just feel drawn and tired. Tracy said fatigued. Yes. And Faye said stomach growls. Okay, and Siri/Susan says, I sometimes feel it in my belly and I feel tired. These are all great examples. Yes. Is there any other examples of signs and symptoms of hunger? It looks like just about everyone has responded. So if you notice, and that's a great one too, I feel anxious. I like that. So if you notice with all these symptoms, it's something we experience frequently, right? We've come to know these symptoms. So these could be unique to us. Some people will get something like, the growling. Some people will notice other experiences of hunger. So next question is, what else can be confused with hunger for you personally? And go ahead and share that in the chat window to everyone as well. So what else is sort of a fake hunger, or what can be confused with hunger for you personally? Yes, so people always say thirst. Yes. I love it. Boredom and depression. Yes. And anxiety. Absolutely. Those go hand in hand, don't they? Wanting a break from tasks. Yes. Loneliness, sadness, anger, boredom. Yeah. So great. Keep typing if you're still answering. Yes, wanting a break. Okay. Boredom and grief. Yes. So we can have lots of different things that are confused with hunger. So in thinking about, we have physical hunger and then we have these, what I call head hunger, which is where we aren't physically hungry, but we want to eat anyways. So in order to just make that distinction, I'm going to share about some of the symptoms of true physical hunger. So when we're really hungry, and this is when we've gotten very hungry, right? So it's like what Siri said, knowing I haven't eaten in a while. Yes. So when we experience hunger that is past just the point of I'm a little bit hungry. So I'm gonna say a disclaimer. We don't want to get this hungry all the time, but I'm gonna explain where we're really, really, really hungry, what that looks like. And we're not aiming to get a headache every time we get hungry, right? Okay. But when we're really, really hungry, we notice two major things happening. So our stomach feels empty, just like somebody said in the chat. And then we notice our blood sugar drops. So these two things produce a variety of other symptoms, such as the hunger pangs. Some people talked about the feeling in their stomach. So the stomach emptying produces these first three, the hunger pangs, the growling, and the emptiness. So that's one thing we notice. And when the stomach empties, the blood sugar drops and we notice these other symptoms, like we might feel a little nauseous. We might be irritable, or what people call hangry, right? Hungry and angry. We may feel a headache coming on. We may feel very low energy, and perhaps like we can hold up our hand and we see it kind of shaking. That's when you know your blood sugar is too low, right? And you may have difficulty focusing on the task at hand. So say you're working and it becomes really hard to focus right around 11:30 when you get hungry for lunch or whatever time you get hungry. And it's really hard to focus on what you're doing. So what do these symptoms all have in common? Go ahead and share in the chat. What do you think these all have in common? Yes, thank you, Emily. So Emily said they're physical. Absolutely. These are all physical symptoms we can feel in our body. It's like facts. We're not making it up in our mind. These are physical symptoms, and sometimes we confuse hunger with other things, but hunger is something that comes on gradually over time. We may notice it in a certain moment, but hunger isn't like, oh, I saw something and I want to eat it. Hunger is a feeling that comes on gradually over, a couple of hours since we last ate. So if we look at this list of symptoms and we know they're all physical, the next piece of this is going to be how hungry am I? So we're going to learn to tell, hungry isn't just yes or no, it's how hungry am I? So if you imagine hunger or your stomach being like a balloon, think of a balloon that is completely empty. That is like a level 1 on the scale that I'm about to provide. So say if hunger is from 1 over here to 10 over here, a 1 is like, I am very, very hungry. There's nothing in my belly. And a 10 is like, there's so much food in my belly, I feel like I'm about to pop, like a balloon that's just going to explode. So that would be like after a holiday meal or just after eating way too much. And so this balloon is a great analogy because our stomach is a muscle that expands when we put food in it, and then it kind of goes back down. So an empty stomach is only about the size of our fist. So ideally we would eat about 2 fistfuls of food in one sitting. That's sort of non-watery vegetables. So, 2 fistfuls of your like starchy foods or protein-rich foods, those kind of dense foods. And then we'd have as many, green leafy vegetables or other, sort of water-based vegetables as we'd like to fill our belly without like stretching it. And the belly does 4 days to shrink down when you eat less than you usually do. So it can get stretched out, but then it can come back. Takes about half of a week to do that. So you can think of a balloon as an example of, stretching the stomach. And so it's uncomfortable when that stomach stretches. So when you get to a 10 or, 7, 8, 9, and 10, that's really kind of uncomfortable. So this is what our stomach could look like at these levels. So a 5 is about halfway full. That's a really good place to eat until, because we're not hungry anymore, but we don't feel the food in our stomach. So remember, level 1, we're just ravenous. We're getting home from work and we're so hungry that we would eat anything in sight, right? Or we're just getting home from a day of shopping or taking care of errands and that sort of thing, and we forgot to bring lunch with us. That's what a level 1 is like. You get home at 3 o'clock and you didn't eat lunch and you're ready to eat anything. And then a 10 is, I am so stuffed I cannot eat one more bite or I'm going to explode. So let's do a little example right now. So this is an exercise called a body, mind, heart scan. So I'd like to invite everyone to just relax, sit back in your chair or lay down or whatever feels comfortable to you. And if you'd like to, you can close your eyes or not. And just go ahead and take 3 deep belly breaths with me. So just go ahead and put your hands on your belly, your lower abdomen, kind of the area below your belly button. And I just want you to breathe as deeply in as you can and exhale as slowly as you can. And we're going to do that 3 times. So breathing in and then out. And try to get all the air out as much as you can. And in and out. And in and all the way out. Let's do 2 more. In and out. And in and all the way out slowly. And now keep your eyes closed. And as you have your hands on your stomach, I want you to imagine how hungry are you? How full is your stomach? Are you more at a 1 where you're super hungry, you haven't had dinner yet, you can't wait to get off this call and get something to eat? Or are you at a 5? Maybe you just had something and you're feeling pretty satisfied. Are you at a 6 or 7? You ate, but you ate to the point where you feel the food in your stomach, you're feeling pretty full? Or are you all the way up to 8, 9, or 10? Maybe you're feeling very, very full. Just think about how empty or full the stomach is just right now, and just notice. And keep taking those nice deep belly breaths. It's really good to relax ourselves. And then I'm going to ask you to think about other areas of your body. So we're going to do a little scan of the rest of our body. Do we feel any pain anywhere? Are we feeling like our hips are tight or our lower back is a little achy or something like that? Or do you feel any discomfort anywhere? Are you feeling fatigued at this point in the day? Are you kind of tired and ready to go to bed? Is there any other physical feelings in your body? Just notice those. And then we're going to go ahead and take our hands and put them up to our head. And now we're going to scan the mind. So think about what thoughts are in your brain right now. Are you thinking about your hunger? Are you thinking about what you have to do after this class? Are you thinking about the day, something that happened earlier, or what you have to do later? What are some of the thoughts that you're having? And just notice those. And then go ahead and put your hands over your heart and notice what type of feelings you're carrying today. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling busy, tired, uh, peaceful? Are you feeling bored? Maybe you wish there was more to do. Are you feeling lonely? Are you wishing you could have more social interaction? So notice any of the feelings that come up today. And again, give yourself a number on that hunger and fullness scale from 1 through 10, 1 being very, very hungry and 10 being very, very full. Where are you at? And go ahead and slowly open your eyes and just return to the present moment. And that is an exercise that we can do anytime we're really not sure if we're hungry. We can do that if we're hungry or we want to eat something, but we're not really hungry and we want to know what's really going on, like inside, want to know what our thoughts or feelings are. And it's a great exercise to do when you go to a holiday party, say it's November or December, and you walk in the door and there's food everywhere, and you just want to center yourself. You can go to the bathroom and do a body, mind, heart scan, right? And just get away and just check in with yourself. So I'd love to hear in the chat window, what was that like for you, that body, mind, heart scan? What did you notice when we did that? Were there any new feelings or thoughts or physical sensations that you weren't aware of before we did it? So Tracy said she's relaxed. Yeah, it is relaxing to take those deep breaths, and that's something available to us 24/7. You're having trouble sleeping, you can do some deep belly breathing. Okay, so reflecting on the day makes you realize whether you have or have not eaten enough. I love that. So it's just a nice checkpoint, right? And Anne says, it feels good to see where I am and what's going on with me. And Ian said, let go of some tension in my shoulders. Yeah, a lot of us carry tension here, and our shoulders will go up and up and up toward our ears, and we have to consciously breathe and tell them they can come back down and relax again. Great. So if you would like to do this body, mind, heart scan again, I do have a resource I'm going to send out, which is a recording of me leading one of those. And that's available in some of the resources. If you email me at the end of the presentation, I can send you that. So here's the hunger and fullness scale that we've been talking about. So just as a visual, there's some descriptions that go along with each of these numbers. So I said we would talk about when's the best time to eat, and that's our next topic. So as we think about hunger, it's not am I hungry, yes or no, it's kind of how hungry am I? So this scale can help us to determine how much we might need to eat, and how hungry are we? Are we hungry for a big meal, maybe a snack, something small, maybe something light, or maybe something more filling? So this is really helpful before we start eating to help us determine what we might want to eat that would be satisfying. So if we know how hungry we are, we know what type of a meal might be satisfying for us. So the ideal time to start eating would be actually between a 2 and a 3. So if you think about when's the best time to eat, from 5 to 10, you're not really hungry. So 5 is satisfied. It's like you've eaten enough that you're not hungry anymore. You don't feel any food in your stomach. 6 is more like you're not hungry, but you feel the food in your stomach. You're feeling full, and 7 is like very full. And the others, just it's more and more and more full, up 8, 9, and 10. So really, we don't need to eat when we're at a 5 through a 10. It doesn't mean we can't eat. So am I hungry? The concepts I'm sharing, they're not meant to be a diet that's restrictive, where it's like, if you're not hungry, don't eat. That's not what we're saying, because that would be very restrictive, and that would kind of cause us to want to rebel and say, but I'm going to have this anyway, and it would kind of be counterproductive. So the ideal time to eat is actually, if you were at a 4, you can, wait a little longer till you get hungrier, or you can do some, little snacking, have something small, maybe a little appetizer or something like that. And the other option would be to wait till you get to about a 2 or a 3, which is the ideal time to eat. So I love this. Tracy said cheese. Yeah, so you might have a little snack, right? I love that. Thank you, Tracy. So these are all great suggestions. So, and then a level 1 is a very high risk time for overeating. So use caution if realize you've been doing some sort of task, and then it's like all of a sudden, oh my God, I haven't eaten for 5, 6, 7 hours. I am ravenous. Maybe you forgot to eat breakfast and it's 1 p.m. or, noon, and you are just about to eat everything in sight. Just take a deep breath and say, okay, I'm really hungry. I'm going to I'm going to feed you as soon as I can. I'm just going to get, kind of think about what might be the best thing to have first. And ideally something with a protein or a healthy fat would be good. We often think of eating something with like quick sugar first, and that will raise our blood sugar, but it may also cause us to crash. So yes, Tracy, I love this idea of a cheese or avocado. That's a great idea. So the ideal time to eat is this 2 or 3, and or at a 4 is fine, but we might not need as much to eat when we're at a 4. Okay, so what's next? So hunger, some of the rhythms of hunger. So hunger is sort of different day to day. You know this from your experiences in the summer and the winter. You may be more hungry when it's colder weather outside. Um, Hunger may really seem erratic and it might not follow a clock. So one of the triggers we're going to talk about for eating when we're not hungry is this like following a schedule and meal times and work schedules and that sort of thing. And not all of that can be, avoided. So sometimes we have to eat at a certain hour when we have a break from work, but we can train our bodies to try to be hungry at those times too. By how much we eat at the previous meal, either eating a little more or a little less, to try to be hungry for those times that we have available to take a break from work. So it may seem like we're hungrier one day and less hungry the next day, and that may depend on how much physical activity we've gotten. It could depend on the weather or just how much stress we have currently, how much mental energy we've been investing. So we can use hunger and fullness to establish a consistent meal pattern. So what I mean by that is by noticing our hunger levels and our fullness levels, we can, determine when is a good time to feed our bodies regularly so that our body knows it's going to get some food. And it's best you know, um, to eat regular meals, to not go 5, 6, 7 hours without eating, just because it reassures the metabolism when we eat at regular intervals, when our body starts to show those signs of hunger. So we don't want to wait until we're at a level 1 or until we get a headache or that really shaky low blood sugar. We don't want to get that far. So actually, ideally, I should have shown on the previous slides, when do you want to start cooking or preparing or getting your meal from a restaurant or something? Maybe a level 4 is a good time to start thinking about what you're going to eat. Does that make sense? So it's the best time to eat would be a 2 or a 3, but then we're going to have to sort of pre-think and maybe, thaw something from the freezer. We'd have to really think ahead, right? So it is good to plan ahead, and that is something that can be helpful. So hunger is also affected by how much we eat. So we've all, had something small for maybe breakfast and then been hungry an hour later, like maybe we have a bowl of cereal and we're hungry an hour later. We have a piece of toast and we're hungry an hour later. But sometimes if we have toast with peanut butter, that could last us longer. Or if we have, avocado toast, or, if we have something, like eggs that has more protein, that could hold us over for longer. So hunger is definitely affected by what we eat. You've also probably noticed this at lunch or dinner. If you have just a salad with a little bit of dressing and there's no, sort of fats or meats or eggs or cheese or anything that's protein or fat on the salad, it's probably not going to hold us over very long, right? It's like sort of a garden salad wouldn't maybe be a whole meal, maybe for some people, or maybe if you weren't that hungry, it could be. But typically we need something more substantial to last longer. Okay, and hunger is affected by what we eat. I think I just flip-flopped those, but you kind of understand. So it's affected by what we eat and how much. So if we eat something little, we'll probably be hungry sooner. And if we eat more, we will last longer. So this is pretty intuitive. We might be hungry for a specific food. So sometimes we know intuitively that our body needs protein or carbohydrates or a certain macronutrient. So we might feel hungry for a specific thing. And this is my favorite. So hunger can't be satisfied before it occurs. So as humans, we need to eat, a few times a day. We're not like a cheetah or something that can just have one meal a day. So unfortunately, we can't just eat 3 pizzas and be fine for 3 days. We have to eat fill the belly once and let it go down and fill it again and let it go down. So normally we have to eat maybe 3 times a day or maybe 5 times a day, if, for people that do better with the snacking. So we can't just eat and be fine for several days. But hunger can be postponed. What that means is we don't have to eat the moment we start feeling the hunger pangs at that level 4. We can wait till the 2 or 3. And as we've probably heard before, it does take 20 or 30 minutes to tell that we're getting full. So actually some foods, I've just learned this more recently, is some foods kind of tell our brain we're getting full more immediately, like the proteins and the fats, whereas the carbohydrates kind of have to reach our stomach first. So they take more like 20 minutes to tell we're full. Whereas the proteins and fats start sending the signal to our brain after like 5 minutes. Okay, she's eating, she's getting nourishment. Okay, so it looks like this slide kind of repeated, doesn't it? I think we've already heard this one. Oh, okay. It looks like these are in here twice for some reason. Okay, so remember, with all this information tonight, we are aiming to eat when we're hungry simply because the food will taste better, not because it's definitely okay to eat if we're not hungry. So that's one of your options. It's just if we do that every time, we're going to have a lot of excess fuel that our body isn't able to use. So this is not a restrictive diet saying if you're not hungry, don't eat. We're just saying it's pretty good to notice if you're hungry, and most of the time try to eat when you have those physical hunger symptoms. So if you're not hungry, I love this picture. If I'm not hungry, what I need isn't in the fridge or the freezer or the pantry, that sort of thing. So think about this. What are some of your thoughts on that? If you want to share in the chat window, what do you think of this picture? What does this make you think of for you personally? What are some of our other needs besides hunger that we might go to the fridge for? Oh, I like this connection to other people. Yeah, especially right now, we're so isolated, most of us. Yeah, sometimes we're hungry for connection or companionship. Yes, and sometimes sleep. Absolutely. So this is a really important one. When you say sleep, it can be a trigger. One of the very early clients I had when I first started coaching about 10 years ago, she used to say hunger or tired, she said, does not equal food, right? And I was thinking it doesn't, and she said tired equals rest. And I just thought that was mind blowing. It's so simple, but when we're tired, it means we need to sleep. It might not mean we need to eat something. Sometimes we're tired and hungry, and that's a different story. But that's what the body, mind, heart scan can be really good for, is to really pause and determine, am I tired? Am I hungry? Is it both? So sometimes it's both. Okay, so Faye said comfort food. Absolutely. We go to the fridge and we look for comfort food. I can remember when I lived alone, I would go to the fridge sometimes, and it's like in the middle of winter, usually this would happen, where I'd go and it's like I would open it just to see what was in there. Has anyone done this where you just kind of open, you look around, and it's like, I lived alone. Did I think anything was going to like walk off and just like change places? Or did I think new food was going to come in that I didn't put there? So I always found that comical. Okay. So this is a great phrase that you can actually write down and put on your refrigerator if you would like to, or you can put another phrase and just put that on your refrigerator. It's a nice in your environment to think about, am I really hungry, or is it some other need that's coming up for me? So in one of my classes that I lead, I like to have people make a sign, sort of hand draw a sign that either says something like this or something completely different. So many of the participants in those classes have come up with really interesting signs like, stop, and then they had their name, and then like, are you hungry, or is this a false alarm? Is it like a fire alarm, a false alarm? So I think those are more funny when they're unique to you. So I encourage you to make your own sign, something like that for your fridge. Okay, so now we're going to shift into triggers. And a trigger is really anything, it's like a light switch that initiates this sequence of eating. So it's something that makes us want to eat, in this case, when we're not hungry. So it's really powerless unless it's activated. Like, for some people, there could be like chips in the house or brownies or something like that. But until they experience a trigger that makes them want to eat it, those brownies could be powerless. Some people will be triggered just because they're there, which we're going to call an environmental trigger, which is one of the triggers we're going to talk about. And then some people will not be triggered by the brownies until there's like an emotional trigger. Okay. So when we slow down and pause, such as that body, mind, heart scan, it allows us to really recognize what different things trigger us. All right. So triggers can be three different types. We can have physical triggers, environmental triggers, so things that are around us, or we can have emotional triggers. So we're going to dive into all three of these. And I encourage you to get out a sheet of paper if you would like to, and just jot down what some of your top triggers are. And I'm also going to provide a handout, the resources. If you email me, I will send you this handout, which is a list of all the triggers for head hunger. It's like a nice little checklist, and that will allow you, you can print that out and you could put it on your fridge, and you could start noticing what are some of the common triggers for you. So for now, just go ahead and grab a sheet of paper if you have one, and something to write with. And let's just see which of these triggers seem like they're most common for you. So under the physical triggers, we have things like thirst, we have being tired or fatigue. We might have pain, so that could be physical pain, like you have a headache, or your neck hurts, your back hurts, your knee hurts, your hip hurts, that sort of thing. And then for women, it could be a hormonal cycle. So some women will eat a lot more in maybe the week before their menstrual cycle. And then we have things like medications or medical conditions. So go ahead and just jot down if you think any of these, could be some top triggers for you. And at the end, we're going to do an exercise I'm going to give you that you can help turn your triggers into what you're really craving. So it's important that you recognize what some of these triggers might be. Don't worry if you don't know what all of them are, but just think of what are some of the likely suspects. Okay, so go ahead and write those down for physical triggers. And then we have the environmental triggers. So there's a lot of these. They could be things like times. So we have, meal times, like everyone in the family is sitting down for dinner. Is that a trigger? Maybe I'm not hungry at, 6 p.m. or something because I just ate at 4:30 when I got home from school or whatever. It's like the trigger is that everyone else is eating and there's an expectation that I sit down with the family and talk about the day and, talk to my kids and that sort of thing. Seasons can be a trigger. So, seasonal foods that we see, like special foods like pumpkins spice everything in the fall, or there's Irish cream, like coffees at Dunkin' Donuts or whatever in March, or, we have these seasonal foods that are sort of a novelty. So they're only available during part of the year. There's things like, peppermint things in the holiday season, and everything's like limited edition. So seasonal foods, turkey and mashed potatoes are one example. They're available year round, but why do we eat so much at Thanksgiving that we feel terrible afterward, right? We could make turkey and mashed potatoes any time of the year. So High risk times could be another one. We talked about that, walking in the door home from work and you're just ravenous. And then a lot of the environmental triggers are what I call the sight and smell of food. So it can be other people eating. It could be seeing a candy dish. Maybe you're at work or you're at a doctor's appointment. There's like a candy dish on the waiting table. Or you're watching television and you see some advertisement for certain food that looks good. It could be buffets can be a big trigger, like, or if you're at like a wedding or something like that, you want to try everything. So that's a big trigger. And then the portions at restaurants can be a trigger, just having it on your plate and being taught we need to clean our plates. That could be a trigger. And then there's things like dealing with food, just the cooking, the preparing, all of that, especially if you're hungry while cooking, right? Eating chips and having a glass of wine while we cook, that sort of thing. And then there's food associations, like in one of my classes earlier today, we were talking about the association between popcorn and the movies, right? Like they go together, right? They're just, it's a food association. Or maybe um, we have associations with other foods around other holidays. Those are very strong. And sometimes it's certain people, like every time we see our grandmother or our grandchild, we bake cookies together, right? Or, you know, when we come home from college, we give our, you know, our parents give us something, you know, to take back home, something like that. And then there's all kinds of entertainment. There's, if you do, you know, movies and sports, and sometimes when we're watching TV, we think we need to be eating something. Okay, so those are just a few examples. And social events are a really strong one because everyone around us is eating most of the time. And we don't want to feel left out if we're not eating. And sometimes we have what I call the food pushers encouraging us to try something that they brought to the potluck or the party or something like that. So go ahead and jot down which of these environmental triggers are affecting you. Just go ahead and write down the ones that you think are the most powerful for you. Okay, so after this, we're going to move on to the emotional triggers. Does anyone need more time with this? The environmental triggers. We'll have all of it on the handout, so you can look at those tomorrow if you'd like. Okay, so these are the emotional triggers. So we don't just eat for the sad emotions. We eat for every emotion. So there's mad, sad, glad. You know, we have pleasure, love, reward, celebration. These are all very positive, happy emotions. So we eat, we have birthday cake for celebration, right? That's a trigger. And then we have this like neutral thing like boredom. That's sort of neutral. We just don't have enough to do. And then there's this like, there's too much, like the stress, the overwhelm. So sometimes in those situations, avoidance also goes with that. So stress, overwhelm, and avoidance kind of group together, and those can all become a trigger. And then there's things like the worry, anxiety, which kind of goes with overwhelm too. And then we have some of the more sadness, the depression, the loneliness, shame, anger, deprivation, weight, stigma. So just stepping on the scale could be an emotional trigger for someone to want to eat. So go ahead and write down which of these emotional triggers are affecting you, if any. Okay, so now, by now you should have a list of some physical, environmental, or emotional triggers, and we won't all have all of these. So some people have mostly environmental or mostly emotional or mostly physical triggers, and many people have a combination of the three. So now that we have an idea of our triggers, I'd like to take you through some exercises to determine how do we know what we're really craving when we experience these triggers to eat when we're not hungry. So this is the really juicy stuff. I love this. So again, it's if I am not hungry, what I need isn't in the fridge, right? So it's something else other than the food that we need. So this is an exercise you can do to determine what some of your true needs are or what you're really craving. So if you fill in the blanks here, this is kind of like Mad Libs. When I feel, okay, when blank trigger happens. So can someone give me an example of a trigger? Just type a trigger into the chat window. Go ahead and everyone just type something in there that we can use for examples. What are some of the triggers that you saw in the last few slides that apply to you or to others? Okay, food association and celebration. Okay. So let's say it's a celebration or a buffet, okay? So maybe say we're at a wedding, okay, and there's just a giant food buffet. This is kind of unrealistic because nobody's getting married right now because of the pandemic, but imagine we're at a wedding, right? So the trigger is this buffet of food, right? The when I'm at the buffet, it could be a Chinese food all you can eat buffet, it could be a wedding buffet, any buffet, it could be a potluck. There's lots of food. So when I see lots of food on a buffet or a potluck, I feel, and then you can fill in the blank. Maybe it's excited because you want to try everything. Maybe you feel overwhelmed. Maybe you feel like, well, this is more variety than I'm ever going to have at home, so I have to try every single thing, right? So maybe it's when I'm at a buffet, I feel like it's sort of like the opposite of deprivation. So say I've been eating really simply at home or I don't cook that much, and maybe the feeling is I feel excited to try all this stuff. And what I really need is more variety in my like diet every day. I will, try to create something new at home so that I can get some of that variety every day. Or there could be a million examples of this. So say it's another need, such as, so somebody said transitions. So say there's a transition, like when I feel this trigger of a transition. So for instance, maybe coming home from work or a transition from dinner to bedtime, there's some transition there that could be a trigger. I feel this emotion like maybe it's the end of the day and I'm about to go to bed, but I never took any time for myself, so I feel sort of like, um, I like spent the whole day doing things for other people, so I feel sort of like spent. And then what I really need is some time for myself. And then and I can choose something to do for myself. And maybe it's sleep is the highest priority, or maybe it's taking a bath, or maybe it's reading a book or something like that. So this is a great exercise to try for yourself. Another way of looking at this is to see if your trigger and the true need could be opposites. So this works for a lot of the emotions and physical triggers. So for instance, if you're bored, the opposite of boredom, so boredom is not enough to do, and the opposite of boredom is having something to do. So that's the true need in this case. And then the action step for boredom is like, what do I want to do? Maybe you're stressed most of the time and you don't have that much time on your hands, and suddenly you have time. I had this come up in the class I taught today too. So we had someone who was a busy mother, and she said sometimes she gets bored. So she was going to make a list of things she could do when she had 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, that were things that were really fun for her. So sort of pre-thinking boredom. What can I do when I'm bored besides go to the refrigerator? And then we have other examples like if you're experiencing stress a lot, stress is too much to do. So what you really need is less to do, or to get some of the to-do items checked off, maybe delegating or asking others for help. Or maybe it's a break from thinking about what you have to do. Maybe it's getting some of those things done. So there could be a variety of action steps that you could brainstorm for that one. And then sometimes people are just really tired. So they're, you know, going 50 miles an hour all day and they're just exhausted. But at 9 p.m., it's like, maybe I'll have a snack. I'm pretty tired. And maybe going to bed could be an option. Maybe, laying down and reading a book to wind down for bed and getting more deep, restful sleep. And then there's other triggers like loneliness, which is the true need is companionship. So the action steps could be, can I call a friend? Can I make plans to get together with some people in a socially distant way, or over Zoom? Can I have, Zoom catch up with some friends? And then there's triggers like pleasure. So pleasure is a reason that people cite for wanting to eat. And I think when we're looking for pleasure from food, sometimes we need to ask ourselves, what else are we doing in our life that makes us happy? So what are some things we have to look forward to? Are we looking forward to seeing friends? Are we looking forward to, and this time especially, we have to create things to look forward to because so many things have been canceled. So that's where we really have to dig deep within to get creative about what can we do in our life that would bring us joy. So this is a really powerful exercise, as you can see. So really you just think of the trigger and then try to brainstorm what is the true need and some action steps you can take to get there. So just to recap, some of the things you can do are ask yourself if you're hungry, and practice noticing your hunger and fullness level. So think of that 1 to 10 scale and think of, how hungry am I? Am I thinking I'm, really at like a 1, like I really need food right this instant, and I'm going to be careful not to shoot right from a 1 to a 10 because there's like a slingshot. It's kind of like on the board game Sorry, when you land on one, thing, you like slide to the next 10 squares. So that's level 1 is kind of like that. Another thing you could try is that body, mind, heart scan. And again, if you do email me for those resources, I can send you a link to listen to that. And then another idea, which we just did, was practicing identifying which of those triggers you experience frequently and brainstorming some ways to address what that trigger is telling you really need, and brainstorming some action steps. So actually, I'm going to take some questions, and I'd like to hear some of your takeaways. So Shane, would you like to unmute folks or take questions in the chat window? This is a great
Yeah.
time for questions
So
and answers.
why don't you type your questions in the chat box, and if you prefer to be unmuted to ask a question, you can either ask me in the chat box or use the raise hand feature. Please know that if you choose that option, you will show up on the screen unless you have your video setting off. So go ahead and type your questions, or you can use the raise hand feature, and we will watch, and Hester will try to get to all of the questions.
And if you don't have a question, I'd also love to know, how might you use any of the information that we've talked about tonight? So it could be a question or a takeaway. How's that?
Hester, we have a question that has come through, or a comment saying the number scale is helpful, not thinking of hunger as just yes or no.
Yeah. You know, some questions are yes or no, and hunger is one of those where you could be a little bit hungry or, a lot hungry.
Um, there's a question, are you going to be able to send the body, mind, heart scan as part of the resources?
Yes, I have recorded that on an audio, and that's one of the resources that I'd love to send you. If you send me an email tonight or tomorrow, I can send that to you tomorrow.
And a comment, next time I go to find something to eat, I will stop and rate my hunger.
I love that. Thank you, Faye. That's
Oh,
where that sign on the fridge is really helpful.
Hester, there was one question from someone who couldn't be here tonight wanting to know if you had any tips for how they could distinguish how someone could distinguish maybe a sugar or a salt addiction from just a general hunger addiction.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. So, cravings for sugar and salt can mean several different things. So, I'll start with sugar. So, sugar cravings, sometimes we crave sugar when we're just tired, because what happens is when we don't get enough deep, restful sleep, our body is in survival mode. So, it's trying to give us energy really quickly. And the quickest way to get energy is by, something sugary or sweet, or something like carbohydrate dense, or sometimes we actually use salty, starchy, and sugary kind of foods for that quick energy when we don't get enough quality rest. So that's one comment that I may make about that. And the other time we crave sugar is if we eat a very carbohydrate rich diet with not enough healthy proteins, healthy fats and the proteins. So the fats and proteins help us stabilize our blood sugar, and the carbohydrates that are quick carbohydrates that maybe are not whole grains, or if we eat 30 fruits a day, or if we have a bunch of cookies, those kind of things with the added sugars, those will kind of spike our blood sugar. And what happens with that is we think we need more when the blood sugar comes back down to normal. So we end up becoming what's called insulin resistant, which is where the blood sugar spikes, the pancreas makes insulin to meet that. But the more that happens, it's like the pancreas gets less and less good at making that insulin when we eat lots and lots of sweets. So sometimes sugar addiction, sugar is very addictive. I can say it's 8 times more addictive than cocaine, right, is what people have said. It's a very addictive food. Um, but also sometimes sugar indicates either a lack of protein in the diet or too much protein in the diet. So that could be one thing to look at. And then with salts, sometimes we crave salt when we either have low blood pressure. So if you get dizzy when you stand up, sometimes it's a need for a little more salt. And then also thyroid is something to look at with salts, because we may be craving that iodine that we need, which comes from the salty things like sea vegetables and seafood and that sort of thing. So sugar and salt they're also addictive foods. So there was a book written called Sugar, Salt, and Fat, which is about how the food giants trick us into eating way more. When it comes to processed foods, sugar, salt, and fat are the things that make us want to keep eating a food. So that's what they put in processed foods to make us uh, become what they actually refer to as like heavy users. When we eat a lot of a particular food like Doritos or Cheetos or something processed that is tasting delicious because they've come up with the exact right formula. So I hope that's helpful for the person who asked about the sugar and salt, and maybe for the rest of you as well.
Thank you. We have some more questions in the chat box. Can some of these techniques help rekindle normal feelings of hunger and fullness after they've been compromised?
Mm, okay, that's a great question. So, can some of these exercises help rekindle normal hunger and fullness? Is that what the question is?
Yes. Can some of these techniques help rekindle normal feelings of hunger and fullness after they've been compromised?
Yes. So sometimes people will tell me that they're never hungry, and that's either because we're topping off the tank. Like if you think of a driving down the highway with a gas tank, and we don't stop every time we see a gas station, right? When we're driving down the highway, cross country road trip, we stop at and get gas. First we would check the fuel gauge. Does that make sense? So we have to think of our stomach like we're checking the fuel gauge to see if we need to put more fuel in. So one of the other presentations that I do talks more about that, um, and the three different styles of eating that we often go between, back and forth between. And one of those is instinctive eating or intuitive eating, where we eat for fuel. So it's kind of how an athlete would eat, or a child, or especially a baby, where we view food as fuel. So one of the things that I work with people on is, you know, how did we get from, as a child, we're all born with this instinctive ability to know when we're hungry and when we're full, but we really lose that by like age 10 or so, based on these things we learn, like you must clean your plate, you must eat your vegetables or you don't get dessert, so we learn that vegetables are yucky and dessert's the reward. Or we learn if you stuff yourself, you get to stuff yourself more with sugary foods, right? So there's all these messages that teach kids that we may have to eat past the point of fullness because we don't get to leave the dinner table unless we finish our peas, or we have to eat foods we don't like in order to get a food we do like. So there's all kinds of messages we get as kids to really kind of mess with our hunger and fullness. Either we had to eat when we're not hungry or past the point of full, or maybe we didn't have enough food, so we were always hungry. And so maybe as an adult, we don't want to go to bed hungry because we did that when we were a kid, and the brain doesn't want to go to that painful memory again. So some people I've worked with have, snacks before bed because they're sort of fighting that painful memory of going to bed hungry all the time as a child. So there can be lots of reasons that we're not in touch with hunger and fullness.
Another question that has come through. I've been noticing lately that I don't feel hungry or I don't notice my hunger, but I think I should eat so that I get adequate nutrition. Is it best to wait until hunger appears?
That's a wonderful question. I think there's more than one answer to that. Um, I always advocate for people to be what I call a scientist with our own body. So you're the only one that knows your body and has lived in it your whole life. So I can't sort of tell you what is going to work best. I think you're going to need to experiment. But if you don't notice your hunger, there's several things you can do. So sometimes people tell me they're not hungry in the morning for breakfast, and there can be several reasons for that. Sometimes it's because if we ate, dinner and that, or late at night, or maybe eating after dinner, sometimes we don't get hungry for breakfast. There can be other things that happen, like sometimes we go too long without food and we just don't feel hungry at all. So there can be that too. If you think of hunger like a campfire, the best way to fuel a campfire is to put a few logs of wood on that fire at a time. And the campfire is like our metabolism, or our digestive fire. So if we put too much wood on it at once, we're just going to smother the fire, right? Or if we don't feed that fire for a long time, it's going to burn out. So we want to have a balance between putting like a few pieces of wood on the fire every, when it needs it. So it's going to be the fire is different for everyone, that metabolic rate, right? So sometimes we find we don't need as much food as we used to. So that can also be a change. So I think listening to your own internal body wisdom is really important, and experimenting with, you know, when I eat these particular foods, how long can I go without eating till I really need something? And just really listening and doing that body, mind, heart scan is important.
We have a couple of comments and one more question. Comments, I had never really thought of free refills being a trigger, but definitely I feel obligated to go back for seconds when I see that.
Yeah, we want to get our money's worth, whether we paid for it or whether it was free, you know?
And a further comment, really fascinating messages that we get as kids, lots to think about. Um, and a question, salt is very powerful for me. Once I start, it is really hard to stop. What am I missing if I am drawn to salt?
Mm. Okay, so salt, several different things. So sometimes we're dehydrated, sometimes that's one thing. Sometimes it's thyroid, sometimes it's low blood pressure, sometimes it's a host of other things. So I think salt is also a strong flavor, just like sugar. So sometimes the more strong flavors we experience, whether it's sweet or salt, our brain kind of remembers that level of flavor. That's why people have to put a certain amount of salt on their food every time, or a certain amount of sugar in their coffee every time. We get used to the amount of sweetness or saltiness that we commonly experience. So our brain learns to crave the foods we're giving our body at the levels of sweetness or saltiness that we give it. So I think some of it can be like slowly trying to reduce the salt or sugar over time. I've seen that work really well with sugar, for folks that maybe used to put sugar in their coffee and just slowly reduced until there was no sugar, and they were literally drinking the coffee without sugar, and that sort of reset their need for sugar the rest of the day in other foods. I've seen that really work for some people if it's, your goal is to give it up, just slowly kind of coming down off of it.
Excellent. I think we have reached all of the questions at this point. So Hester has information, a handout with resources and a review of some of the things she talked about tonight. So if you would like that, you can email her directly. And Hester, can you give us that email address again?
Yeah, so the email is in the middle of this screen. It says Hester, I'm sorry, that's my
Website.
website. Okay. They're similar. It's Hester Kohl Wellness, just spelled like it is on that website, at gmail.com. And I would also like to invite you, if you're interested, to come to another free talk just like this on Zoom. It's being sponsored by the Belfast Library on July 28th about transforming anxiety into joy. And I did this talk a couple of weeks ago for an audience in Arizona, and they were really, they really enjoyed it. So I hope that some of you will take advantage of that as well. And if you want to hear about other events like that, I do a lot of these types of talks. You can get onto my the homepage of my website, hestercolewellness.com, and just at the bottom, you'll see a little thing to join the newsletter. And we do have there's classes that we do like this, and there's a couple of 8-week workshops coming up. On Thursdays, there's a morning one and an afternoon one. If you're interested in more on this type of topic, there's an 8-week series. So please email me if I can send you this handout, and also the body, mind, heart scan, and some other resources. Or if you just have feedback, or just want to reach out and say hello, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much, and I hope you got something you can use tonight. Ask yourself if you're hungry. Ask yourself, how hungry am I? Use that little sign on your fridge if you're inspired to make one. And I hope to hear from you on how this is all going. So thank you. Have a
And
wonderful evening.
Hester, you have some thank yous coming through from the audience. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Very illuminating. And I would like to remind all of you, on behalf of Rockland Public Library, that this will be posted sometime next week. So if you want to review the video, it will be on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. This is our second talk that we've hosted with Hester. We hosted her back in the winter for Sleep Your Way to Better Health, and many people came to tell me afterward how much they had appreciated that talk. So I'm sure that we will have Hester Kohl back again in the future for another talk. And thank you so much, Hester, for your time and your expertise. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I wish you a peaceful evening. Take good care, and we will sign off now. Good night, everyone.